Hello, everyone. This is the Journaling with PT podcast. I am your host, PT Russell. And today, all the way from California, we have an exceptional talent, a screenwriter, Mr. John Sullivan joins us. Hello, John.
Hi, PT. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and how is the temperature in Tinseltown? How is the cinematic experience out there, movie going and that type of thing?
Well, right now we're getting close to, well, we're in the holiday season right now. So this is when everyone goes skiing. This is when most of the town shuts down. Not a ton of deals are being made. A lot of people are going away, but luckily the box office has been great. So you've got Wicked, Moana, Gladiator 2. You've got these movies that are just doing incredibly well in the theaters. So whenever there's a spike in movie going and the numbers are good, it's always positive because we had a lot to go through after COVID. It took a long time for movie theaters to come back. So any blockbuster, any record-breaking opening weekend is always positive. So everyone's excited about that. So I think everyone's going into the holiday break with some positivity for the new year.
Right. And that's great. I'm happy to hear that. Some states not so, well attended, the cinemas, and some are. So it's good to know that out in California, in New York, it's always bustling, right? It's always busy and well attended, and that's great. And Broadway is doing well as well. So that's super. Yeah, that's super. Have you done any prognosticating this season yet? Have you seen any of the Oscar contenders?
I haven't. And it's not because I don't want to. There's a lot of great movies that are out there. I haven't been able to get away from the desk in a while.
Exactly.
I do rely a lot on streaming. I do rely a lot on renting movies on video on demand. Which is fine. But I do miss going to the theater. I do love the theatrical experience. I'm lucky that I'm in the guild, so I do get screeners sometimes for the Writers Guild Awards. So occasionally I have a few that I'm waiting to see. I'm looking forward to, I think it's a movie called Enora. It's supposed to be really, really good.
Everyone's talking about that, right?
Yeah. I've heard, and Conclave is supposed to be great. And Wicked, there's a lot of talk for Oscars for Cynthia and Ariana is supposed to be great. So
Wicked is tearing it up. Wicked, Moana, I think. What's the other new release? Moana is the newest one, but they're doing well. All of them.
They're doing incredible. And Moana in particular is doing great. And that movie was originally meant for Disney Plus. It was going to be a TV series, and the powers that be decided at the last minute, let's make this a movie. And paid off. Movies doing gangbusters.
And people responded so well, and that's a good thing for the industry for sure. And I am looking forward to The Brutalist. I haven't seen it, but I'm looking forward to The Brutalist with Adrian Brody and A Different Man.
That's Sebastian Stan. Yeah.
Yes. I think he's in The Apprentice. And if I'm not mistaken, he recently got nominated for the Golden Globe, if I'm not mistaken.
He's a great actor. He's just a solid actor.
He's a man in demand right now.
Oh yeah.
Yes. And so with filmmaking, how did you get started? What interested you with films?
I always, ever since I was a little kid, it was always movies. I loved watching films. I loved renting movies. You can tell behind me, I pretty much, my office is a video store in a sense. It's like a replica of the video store I used to work in the 90s. I kind of wanted to have that nostalgic feel to my environment when I write.
Yeah.
I didn't play a lot of sports as a kid. I didn't really have a ton of hobbies. I just liked movies. And that was, my parents would, I very rarely needed a babysitter. My parents would I just rent like 3 movies, and that my parents knew I wasn't going to get in trouble. That was
count the time. That's approximately 5 hours.
It's exactly, and I would have that in my head when I was renting. I'm like, okay, this movie's 90 minutes. It's 90 minutes. Dinner they'll go out for drinks after dinner, so I'll have this amount of time to watch these films.
Yeah.
I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do in movies. I didn't know if I wanted to be a director. I certainly didn't want to be an actor. I knew I didn't want to act. But I also, it sounds silly now, but I didn't know that people wrote movies until I was like 13 or 14. I didn't know that was a thing. I knew people directed movies. I knew Spielberg directed movies. I knew John Carpenter directed films. But I didn't know that, there's another person sometimes that writes them. And I thought I wanted to be a novelist. I thought I wanted to write books. I wrote very long short stories when I was growing up, 90-page novellas. None of them were particularly good, but I couldn't crack the 300-page barrier. I don't know if I didn't have the temperament or the patience to write a 300-page tome.
That's a lot of pages.
And when I'm 12 or 13, I'm writing this, and I'm writing it longhand too, because I didn't have a computer until I was about 12 or 13. I just couldn't crack that. And then I think it was around the time that I saw the movie Speed. I think that was like 94. And I was just blown away, literally blown away by Speed. And I realized someone wrote this. I just love the movie. I love the kinetic energy of it. I love the structure. I loved it. Did everything right. Checked all the boxes for me as a young teenager. And I look at the credits and it says written by Graham Yost. And I'm like, I want to be Graham Yost. I want to be that guy who wrote Speed. And I just bought a bunch of books from Barnes & Noble, How to Be a Screenwriter. Lou Hunter's Screenwriting 402 was a really good book for me. And just broke it down. And I just started writing screenplays. I had no knowledge of the industry. I didn't know how to sell a screenplay. I didn't know how to market a screenplay. I didn't know who to give it to. And the screenplays were terrible. They were probably long, meandering, unstructured. I didn't have the software yet. I didn't have Final Draft yet. But I just kept on writing. Zombie movies, action films, comedies, whatever. In between, barely doing my schoolwork and
you were committed.
I just loved. Once I realized I could create a movie on paper, I was obsessed. I was writing a screenplay every 2 weeks, and again, I wouldn't proofread them or edit them or anything. I didn't think I would have a career doing this, but gradually, trial and error, and after buying the software, Final Draft, which helps visually to make your screenplay look like a screenplay. It was still bad, but at least it looked like a screenplay. I started finessing the craft. Don't like to use the word the craft, but I guess that's what it is.
It is a craft.
It is, yeah, it is. It's not so pretentious, the craft.
It is what it is.
I started reading screenplays too. It was not as easy in the 90s to late 90s to get your hands on physical screenplays. You could find ones in Barnes and Noble, like you could buy the Pulp Fiction screenplay that was published, and big, like the Titanic screenplay you could probably find that was probably published. But those are production drafts. That's the screenplay after it's been made, shot, edited. Finding like the screenplays that haven't been made yet, things that are in development, that was more important to me because I wanted to know what was out there, what was in the marketplace, what a purchased screenplay looks like before it gets made.
So what was the first one you read?
It was probably the Pulp Fiction screenplay. That was a popular one because it was, Tarantino, a director and a writer. And there aren't a lot of rock star screenwriters. Most of the names that most people know, they're also directors. So you get your Tarantinos and your Nolans, and yeah, they're writers, but they're also directors. But Tarantino had this nice visual sense, so his screenplays got published and they were like bestsellers. You could just read them. So that was probably like the first one. It's not the best example because he breaks all the rules, which is inspiring, but it's typically not a good barometer for what a screenplay should look like. But that was probably the first one. And after that, the internet started happening. And then I was able to find things. I was able to find other screenplays online and examples. And then I sort of figured out that there was a way I might be able to market stuff I was writing. So I didn't do that for a while. I was never confident in anything I was writing until I was in college. In college, I started really thinking about, I could sell something. Maybe I could sell a screenplay. So I would, back then, this was the internet was the Wild West, and production companies would have their email addresses out there. So I could just email companies and be like, hey, I have a movie. Right? Would you like to read it? And that was a unique way back then to market yourself. And I would do that. I would write screenplays in college and then find a magazine like Creative Screenwriting, or just go online and just find email addresses and query these companies and ask them if they would like to read my movie. So during my college career, a lot of guys were going out to bars and partying. I was doing that too, but sometimes I'd stay in and write and try to, figure out, maybe I could sell a movie while I'm in school. How cool would that be? I could drop out and become a screenwriter. That was, even if I sold something, I would have gotten pennies on the dollar. So
you were very ambitious, for sure.
Oh yeah. This is also like a lot of great things were happening in film at the time. Scream had come out, Good Will Hunting, American Beauty, Titanic, Rounders. There were a lot of iconic films that were coming out during that time, and it was very inspiring. And it felt very real to me, especially when like Matt and Ben won their Oscars for screenwriting. And yeah, they were actors, of some note, but they were like almost my age, and it was their first screenplay. And so a lot of cool stuff happening in the late 90s. That was very inspiring. But that was my entrance into the world. And I always knew I wanted to do that. I always knew I had no plan B. I really didn't. And I had some luck. I guess when I was younger, I optioned a movie while I was a senior in college.
Wow.
And I got like $500 for it, but it was crazy to think that, this small production company would option something of mine and give me a little bit of money and maybe make it. I don't know what happened to them. That disappeared. I don't even have the script anymore. It's like 18 computers ago. But that was sort of, that kind of let me know that I was on the right track, I guess.
Yes.
What I was doing.
That's a testament to the type of writer you are. I think because you're a great writer, people recognize that, right?
I appreciate that.
Yeah. And so what was the film? Can you recall what the film was that you optioned your first for?
Oh, of course, yeah. It's like my first kiss. Like I always remember it. It was a movie. I had written it actually for Project Greenlight, the Miramax show that Matt and Ben were producing at the time, and it was a contest. And I think I wrote it in like 2 weeks, and it was called The Friday Man, and it was like an espionage thriller. The hook was this young kid gets a job at a mysterious company, and he only has to work on Fridays. And it turns out that he's being brainwashed, and he actually works as an assassin Sunday through Thursday. So, it didn't make a lot of sense. I thought the idea was cool. I had to write it super low budget because I think the threshold for the budget for Project Greenlight was like $2 million. So I cut a lot of corners. It wasn't as elaborate as it could have been. And I always liked it, but I don't know what happened to it. I lost it. It was on a 3.5-inch disc. So it's gone, lost to the ether.
Oh my. That's unfortunate. You should have had that like to put somewhere on your shelf behind you.
I know.
With all
my
the
mom framed the check. I do have the check still framed in my house somewhere. I think it's on a shelf somewhere. But after that, I graduated and I needed to make real money. So I got a job at a small production company reading scripts, and was based in Tribeca, which was kind of neat because that's
yeah, reading scripts, that puts you at an advantage, does it not?
What's that?
Doesn't that put you at an advantage? Reading scripts and seeing what's coming in and seeing what people are going for?
It was all, yeah. It was all.
What's being greenlit, what isn't? That's a good place to be.
Yeah, no, it was great experience. Although this particular company never made anything, and the caliber of scripts that were coming in were terrible. So I was just reading bad scripts all the time. But that let me.
Well, they stay in business.
Yeah, I know. They're still in business. I check in on them every so often. They still have not made anything.
My goodness. What are they doing?
I don't know. Even back then I was 21. I'm like, what's going on here? Are they laundering money? Like, what is this?
Exactly. Yeah.
Luckily, I kind of got out of that job. I wound up getting a job at a talent agency, at a major talent agency in New York, where I worked in the lit department as a administrative assistant to the floor. So, which means I just fixed copiers and delivered coffee. And that was great because this was a legitimate agency and I read real scripts. I had to photocopy them all the time. So there were a lot of things that were coming in. I read the first draft of Spider-Man before Tobey Maguire came on. Like, all this cool stuff was happening, and all these scripts were coming through the agency, so I was able to read a lot of them. And in my downtime, I had a lot of downtime, I wrote an action thriller that I didn't know what to do with. I figured it'd be like a good Jean-Claude Van Damme movie or something, and maybe one of the agents, maybe I could slip it to him or something. But I really kind of didn't want to get fired, so I kind of balked at that. I probably
wait a minute. You had access to Jean-Claude Van Damme?
I in my internet venturings, I would encounter producers every so often that had a deal with somebody who knew Van Damme, and Van Damme was looking for this, and I'm like, oh, I could write something on spec, and maybe this would be right for someone like Van Damme. And but I wasn't a martial artist or anything, so I was just writing action movies. And I wrote an armored car thriller, an armored car heist movie. That was kind of like Speed in an armored car. And I didn't know what to do with it. So I kind of was just like, I still had my collection of email addresses, and I emailed a manager based in California who was just starting up, and he had no clients. And he read my log line, which is a 2-sentence description of my script. And he said, this sounds cool. I'm working with the producer of Fast and Furious. He's like a buddy. He had a first look deal with him, which means that this producer gets a first look at everything that this manager has before he sends it out to anybody else. And this doesn't really happen as much anymore, but this is what happened. He slipped it to this producer. The producer had a deal at Sony Pictures, and Sony bought it while I'm working in the mailroom of a talent agency. And I got a phone call on a Friday night from my manager, and he said, hey, I got good news. And I told him, hold on a second, I have to change this light bulb really quick. And he's like, okay. But an offer had come in on the script, and Sony had purchased it. And immediately I had a manager, I had a lawyer. All this stuff happened on like a Friday evening. And I was supposed to go out to like my friend's party that night in New York. And I had a good excuse for being late. But yeah, the movie got set up at Sony, and that started me working professionally. I wanted to keep my job, but I didn't want to give 10% to an agent. So because I wasn't a client, it was sort of a conflict of interest. So I sort of had to leave the job.
So how has it been? I mean, like, 'cause everyone's going after an agent. Like, you have to have one if you want to be anyone. So how did you, with just your manager, how did that work?
Managers are, and this is my advice to any aspiring screenwriter, find a manager. Managers typically have smaller client lists. They work closer with a writer. They kind of help the writer hone their output a little bit more. Agents tend to come in when the deal is coming in. They kind of handle a lot of the nuts and bolts of the deal. But a manager will help you finesse your script and get it into the hands of the right people. So finding a manager was a little...
The right manager, right?
The right manager, too.
Yes.
Yeah, a manager is kind of one of those things, too, where like a lot of people are managers. You can just say you're a manager. So it's always good to... Agents have to have like a license, but managers can be anybody. So you want to find a manager who's legit. Luckily, I've been very fortunate. My reps have been great. But so managers are a little more, they're easier to sort of find in a way, and they're more open to taking a risk on a first-time writer or a new writer. And that's been my experience. And they kind of help you navigate the business a little bit. They if you're sort of new to Hollywood, if you're sort of new to the strategies that go into selling a script, they really help educate you that. And again, they have smaller client lists, so they can focus on you. So I always say, and a manager will eventually get you an agent, but it's important to have a couple of good pieces of material and to have some interest in your scripts before you start looking at agents.
Mm-hmm. So you have no agent now? You have no
I have an agent now, yeah.
You have one now.
Yeah. Ironically, the agency is the one I used to work at. It's been pretty cool. Like, it's kind of like full circle.
That's a journey. I mean, everyone has a way in. I mean, they have a different way in, and that was yours through Sony. So that's great.
I was super young. I was about 24 years old when this happened. I'm 46 now, so it's been a long journey. But I was very young. I didn't. I mentioned I wanted to keep my job. I stayed at my job for a little while. The following Monday, after the deal had closed with Sony Pictures, it was in the trades. It was in Variety. My name and the deal and the title of the film. The title of the movie was Rapid. They never made it. So don't go looking for this movie. It never got made, unfortunately. I wish it did, but it didn't. But the deal was in the trades on Monday. My job, one of my jobs at the agency, was to hand out the trade publications to all the different agents at the company. I didn't tell anybody that I had sold this script 4 days prior. So just kind of let the emails come in. So I had a lot of my bosses really were like, "Is this you? Sullivan, is this you?" I'm like, "Yep." They're like, "Why are you still here? Why'd you come into work today?" Because you don't get paid for like 6 months.
Yeah, that is great. And Fear of the Dark. When did you write that?
I wrote that. That was my first produced movie. I actually wrote that when I still had a day job. I wrote that when I was at the agency as well. I wrote that during my commute. So before I lived in New York City, I was living at home on Long Island. So Long Island, New York. And so I would have to take a train from my parents' house. Yeah, I was living in my parents'. I had just graduated from college. I was young. I had to take the train from Long Island to New York. It's about a 45-minute commute, and I had a laptop. So I wrote Fear of the Dark during that commute. And I wanted to write a sort of small horror film. I knew that they were kind of easy to make. Horror is always hot. It's hot right now. It never really goes out of style. And I was a big fan of Poltergeist and The Gate, which is a great Canadian movie. The Gate with Stephen Dorff. I was sort of inspired by that film, and I wrote it fairly quickly. I had sent it out to a couple of different producers, and this Canadian company got back to me, and they bought it outright. Not for a lot of money. I didn't get rich off of it, but they purchased it and told me, yeah, we're going to make this. We promise we're going to make this movie. And I'm like, okay. I almost forgot about it, but they wound up building sets. They shot it somewhere in Canada. I don't know exactly where, but full Canadian production, Canadian cast, Linda Purl, Kevin Zegers, Canadian
It's
director.
a great cast. The young kid, he did so well.
Yeah.
Very, very talented. There was so much suspense in that. I was like almost biting my nails.
Oh,
I don't know how you did it. Like the suspense was from the beginning all the way through to the end. And so that was like, it kept me definitely glued to the screen for sure.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And then there were anyone who's interested, it's on YouTube and it's also available for rental or is it on VOD as well? Yes.
All the usual on-demand streamers should have it. I was really impressed with what they did. They didn't have a big budget. I think the movie cost like 500,000 Canadian, but I always felt that I'm not saying the movie is as good as The Conjuring, but when you look at James Wan's The Conjuring and some of the stuff that others like Insidious, the stuff that James Wan has done, the camera movement is very similar. Like there's some really neat stuff. And that movie was just based on, I wanted to write a movie too that was based on my childhood fear of the dark, which I had. And a little bit of an Iron Maiden song thrown in too.
The creepy guys remind me of the Cenobites.
Yeah.
Did you? When they were coming, I was like, oh. And then the music changes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The top hat. The top hat was me. I put that in the script, but the rest of the creature design, that was the filmmakers. They did a great job with it.
Yes. And like I said, with the suspense, because you couldn't see anything, something was there and it was just all of this innuendo and all of this fright build up until finally, and then it continued. So there's this tension that was throughout the entire film. I love that. I love the performances.
It became a sleepover classic, I heard. My mom, who at the time was teaching like 6th grade, she had students that have seen it, and she said, "Where did you see that movie?" I was like, "Oh, we saw it at a sleepover." I'm like, okay, that's cool.
It's a nice sleepover movie.
Yeah,
for sure.
It's PG-13 too, so it's not gory or anything. It's almost like a family horror film, if that's a thing. It's kind of 4-quadrant, like everyone can kind of see it.
Yeah, that little kid, his face is what did it for me, because I would look at his face, he looked terrified, and I was like, am I supposed to be scared too? And I was, because of his acting. His performance was great. So I can't understate that enough. Yes. So it was the Prophecy sequels that you did. I didn't get a chance to watch those. I couldn't find them, at least on Canadian Netflix or those titles weren't available, unfortunately.
I think
how did you get around to
writing those?
What's that?
So that's so right after I had sold that movie to Sony, I was officially like a working writer. When that happens, you become screenwriter famous for like a week. It lasts a week. It's not forever. But everyone wants to meet you. Everyone's like, who's this person just sold this movie, was in Variety and this action thriller, this kid, I was a kid at the time, I guess, this kid who sold this movie. So everyone wants to take meetings with you. You call them generals. So general meetings. They just want to see who you are. Sometimes the producers or executives have ideas that they might want you to flesh out. Maybe a project that they're working on needs a rewrite, or you can just pitch something that you've got. Maybe what's your next idea? And this is sort of what's expected of you when you sit down. So I took a couple of these generals. I didn't move to LA right away. So a lot of my general meetings had to take place in New York. And luckily, Dimension Films was based in New York, had offices in New York City. So that was a cab ride away. That was simple. So I met with them, and it was really neat. It's again, this is like a dream come true. You sit down, and Dimension, they had done Scream and they had the Hellraiser movies. They had Phantoms. I like Phantoms. I think Ben Affleck is the Bond Phantoms. I have to make that joke. But it was neat meeting with everybody, and they kind of sat me down and said, "What do you want to work on?" I said, whatever you have." And they had the rights to Mimic. They had the rights to Hellraiser, Prophecy. They had produced all these films, and Halloween. And then they like crazy ones like Total Recall. For a little while, Dimension controlled the rights of Total Recall.
These are classics, man.
Yeah, and Rambo. At the time, they had the rights to Rambo. So they essentially put these projects in front of me and like, do you have any ideas for sequels to any of these? And I told them I have ideas for all of them. Can I do all of them? And like, you can't do all of them. So I wrote up a couple like pages for each one. I had an idea for Rambo. I had an idea for Total Recall, Hellraiser, Prophecy, and Mimic. I was not going to get Total Recall or Rambo. That was a pipe dream. But Mimic and Prophecy came up.
I could totally see you doing Rambo for real.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes. I wound up working for the studio that did Rambo down the road. So and trust me, I tried to get that job later on. But they said like Mimic and Prophecy are available. Those are the two that we think you might be right for. So I wrote up an idea for Mimic. They wanted to do 2 Mimic movies, so they're going to be back to back. And I had a concept for that. And then with Prophecy, I was kind of stuck because I was a huge fan of the first Prophecy, but I hadn't seen Prophecy 2 or 3. I love the first Prophecy. Gregory Wyden did that one. He's a great writer. Did Backdraft. Did Highlander. And he told me like, we don't have Christopher Walken, so don't write Christopher Walken. I didn't really have a concept for Prophecy though. What I did have were 2 unrelated spec scripts. One was called Crimson City, which was about a cop partnered up with the devil. It was like Devil's Advocate meets Lethal Weapon. Cool idea, right? Script wasn't that great, but second one was a movie called Johnny Blackout, which was about a hitman who has to compete with death himself, the ultimate hitman. So these 2 scripts I wrote maybe a year or so prior to everything, but I didn't do anything with them. I didn't know what to do with them. But I gave them to Dimension, and they said, this is perfect. We'll buy both these scripts, and you turn them into Prophecy movies. I'm like, okay, I'll do my best. So that's how those 2 movies came about. I had to turn 2 movies that had nothing to do with one another and nothing to do with the Prophecy franchise into Prophecy movies. And that's what I did.
Again, a testament of your talent and your creativity.
I guess. We had our director named Joel Swisson came on board to kind of further hone the scripts. And he's a great guy. He did a movie called Trick or Treat back in the 80s, but he's a very prolific horror director. He's done a lot of cool stuff. He came on to sort of rewrite what I did and then direct the movies. And I think they came out great. Great cast. Kari Ward, Doug Bradley, Tony Todd, the late Tony Todd, rest in peace. Jason Scott Lee. And they had a different vibe than the other Prophecy films, but they were still related. And I think they have fans. They were more like almost like this international espionage kind of thing, kind of vibe going on. It's been a while since I've seen them. My memory's a little foggy, but they were cool. And I was very, very proud to be part of that franchise. Yes.
I'm looking forward to watching them when I can get my hands on them. The Postal Service here is on strike. Canada Post.
I saw that, yeah.
So Amazon wasn't working right now, unfortunately. So another time, and maybe we'll have you back on, and you can talk about those films and just go and deep dive into Prophecy in general. That'd be great.
Of course, yeah. Let me know how they are, because I don't remember them well. It's been a while.
Oh, well, I'll have to watch from part one to all the way to see what happens with the continuity. Is there continuity?
Yeah, there is, and
Okay, good.
it's thankfully too, because sometimes you get these direct to video sequels, and they really don't have anything to do with the other
Like
ones.
Children of the Corn.
Exactly. That's Dimension as well. Yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah, or
Uh-oh.
Hellraiser, a lot of those scripts too were originally just standalone scripts that had nothing to do with Hellraiser. And they just turned them into Hellraiser movies. I
Hmm.
get that. Like, you already have a piece of material that could work for an installment, and all it takes is a couple of tweaks and you make it a sequel. So I understand that.
That's something interesting that I didn't know that they did.
Oh yeah,
It's good to know that they do this. They manipulate things.
they did it with all the Die Hard movies, except for the most recent Die Hard. All the other Die Hards started out as unrelated, non-Die Hard movies, and they just turned them into Die Hards.
And they said that Speed was Die Hard on the bus,
Yeah.
and so they said. I don't know. To me, it's an excellent film, and I don't see the relation between those two. To be honest,
No, it's. I
Against the
think
Clock is about it, maybe,
the
but
funny thing is too, like the with Speed, it's really the middle of the movie is the bus. It goes elevator, bus, subway. So it's really three different modes of transportation.
yeah.
So I never saw it as like a Die Hard copy. It's really closer to like a 70s kind of pulse pounder than a sort of an 80s 90s action movie. I always thought it had more of an older kind of vibe to it. But Speed is probably the second best action film ever made. I mean, without a doubt, and it's one of my favorite movies. I
And
can't.
how do you feel about Speed 2?
I I think everyone did a good job, did the best they could in that film, and no one sets out to make a bad movie.
Right. I thought it was
But
entertaining.
yeah,
Of course,
it's
Keanu Reeves is in it. Jason Patrick is great,
he's great.
but he's not Keanu Reeves.
Just not Keanu. The problem was Speed was so incredible and so iconic. There was no they should have never made a sequel to Speed. Um, but yeah, Speed 2 had a lot of flaws. But again, the components in Speed, I mean, Jan de Bont's great director, Sandra Bullock's great actress. I love Jason Patrick, Willem Dafoe. We can't go wrong with it. But it just didn't come together as a worthy sequel.
Right. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Yes, and so after I don't know if I'm going in chronological order or not with your
Kind of are.
filmography.
Yeah, you
Am
are.
I?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It goes.
Okay, so what was next after that?
Next after that.
After
So
the Prophecy sequels.
I got brought in very quickly to do a take for Halloween that it didn't pan out. They did Dimension was after Halloween Resurrection. Dimension was kind of taking a lot of different scripts, interviewing, taking meetings with a lot of different writers, and at one point they were going to do a very smaller version of Halloween that might have been even direct to video, and I did a very short take for the producers, and that didn't go forward. They had a bunch of scripts, and to the point, so many writers got brought in on Halloween 9 that I'm friends with like two of them. Like, I know them. It's the smallest world, screenwriters. And then they just rebooted the whole thing and they went with Rob Zombie. So that wound up not panning out. But it was cool just to even be considered for a Halloween sequel. But after that, I moved to LA, and it was sort of it was a necessity. It's better to be present in Los Angeles and be there for meetings. Nowadays, everything's done like this. You can take it. My whole setup here is set up for Zoom, so I can take general meetings in my office, and it's great. But at the time, if you were sort of personable and you're good in a room and you like to talk, it's a hindrance to not be in Los Angeles. So I packed my bags, got a hockey bag full of underwear and an alarm clock, and moved into a closet on Laurel Canyon. and lived in LA I eventually got a real apartment, but I had to find one first. And then I moved to LA, and that paid off. I was very lucky I wound up, I sold a pilot to the Sci-Fi Channel called Johnny Midnight, which was sort of an exorcist comedy, if that makes any sense. It was a comedy about exorcism. That didn't pan out, didn't get made, but kept me working. And then I got very lucky. I sold the movie to Disney. I wrote a spec script for a movie called Science Fair, which the log for that was, it's night at the museum, but at a middle school science fair. So all the science fair projects the kids make come to life because of nanotechnology, like a meteor. I don't know. I did a couple of rewrites on it. So exactly the reason why all the kids' science projects come to life varied depending on which draft it was. But it was a cool movie. It was sort of a homage to My Science Project, Weird Science, Goonies, Gremlins, a lot of cool stuff. So Disney bought that, which is like crazy. They still haven't made it yet, but if you know anybody at Disney, tell Disney to make that movie because it's a hit. It'll be a hit.
Yes. They have Disney Plus now. There's no excuse.
I know. There's so many different avenues they could take. It'd be a great Disney Plus movie. But got a great producer on that. He'll probably make it happen at some point. So I'm positive. But that was great. And that was a family movie. It was much different than a lot of the stuff I'd wind up writing, which is the action films. But Science Fair, kept me fed, and it was a big spec sale. So again, I was screenwriter famous for another week. See what happens? You're screenwriter famous for like 7 days, and then they forget about you. So unless you're just selling a spec script every week, but no one's doing that.
That's how it works. But yeah, you had the secret sauce. You were in there, and you still are.
A lot of it is right place, right time. But I like to think that, I like to think that whatever I put on the page speaks to people, and the important thing is that the reader or the audience likes it.
And how is the page to the screen? How has that worked? Have you seen? Is it true to the page, to the script that you've seen?
It depends. Like something like Fear of the Dark is very close to what I wrote. The Recoil, very close to what I put on the page. But when you get into bigger films, something like Science Fair or Rapid, or even another movie I don't even want to talk about, but there's a lot of rewrites that go into it. And some of the rewrites aren't even done by you. So sometimes they bring in another writer. So by the time it reaches the screen, it's gone through a lot of permutations. And some are good. Yeah. It's not a rewrite isn't always a bad thing. But yeah, it's the spec script, the pure spec is usually much, much different than the one that makes it to the theaters.
Yes. Recoil is very entertaining. So if anyone hasn't seen it, it is on Amazon. Please go and watch it. And it stars Mr. Steve Austin.
Stone Cold.
Yeah, Stone Cold.
and great Danny Trejo.
Yeah, Danny Trejo. He does. I was surprised that he was such a good actor.
Yeah.
I was really surprised at that. I was looking at him, and it was so, I wouldn't say so convincing as the soft side, because I've watched him wrestle, and I've had a certain perception of him, and so when I saw him in the film, and he has a lot of range there.
He does.
I was surprised by that.
I wrote that.
Seen it?
I wrote that initially as it was originally written for Randy Couture. So there was a deal in place to do a movie for Randy Couture, and I didn't have anything, but I always wanted to do a High Plains Drifter, modern day Western kind of thing. So I wrote Recoil with the idea that maybe Randy Couture would star in it. That deal kind of fell apart. The script went through a couple different hands. At one point, we gave it to Stallone, but he was super busy. This was around Rocky Balboa, the Rocky Balboa, the one that's called one that's titled his name, was coming out. So he was busy. And then I wasn't sure what was going on with it. I had this great, cool, modern day Western with bikers and drama and violence, all the neat stuff. And I was at a party with my manager at the time. And we were just talking to these two guys, getting a drink. And they mentioned like, hey, we're looking for something for Stone Cold. Do you have anything? I'm like, yeah, I have a movie called Recoil. Like, what's it about? It's like, well, Stone Cold would fight a bunch of bikers in a small town. Like, that's perfect. Send it over. So this is like Saturday night. Sunday, I send the script over. Monday, we have an option deal for it. So like, Steve loves it. We're going to make this. It was like the smoothest. This very rarely happens too. It was the smoothest process to have that movie come together. The producers were very cool. I didn't have to do a ton of work on the script. Steve's character, Ryan Barrett, in the script had a lot more lines, but I was talking to Steve's manager, and he said, like, look, Steve can do a lot with just looking at people. So he doesn't need monologues. So, cut some of these lines. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll kill some darlings. And I did, and it worked so much better. Like, Steve just emoted so well.
Yes.
And he's supposed to be an Eastwood kind of character. So it really worked for the story. I love the way Recoil came out. It was a total 1980s canon movie. It would have starred Chuck Norris back in like 1986. It was just exactly what I had grown up on, watching 80s action films. So I was very proud that it, and Terry Miles directed it. Not an action director. He'd done like a lot of independent Canadian dramas, and he nailed it. And the movie looks great. It was shot well.
Oh,
Cast was great.
Yeah, that was very entertaining. And I also I actually watching it for the third time because I'm watching it on mute this time just to see all of the performances, really take a good look. Security also has the look. I fell in love with, I don't know, the colorist or whomever, but they did an excellent job with all the blues and greens.
Yeah,
I was really digging that.
Security had a great vibe to it. They had a French director, I believe, Alain. I'm going to get his name completely wrong. Alain Descharot, again, French European director. He shot that. And again, that was one of my bigger movies. Recoil, I think, cost like $5 million maybe, but Security cost 15. It's like a $15 million movie, and got a theatrical release. Small release, but it was in the theaters. But casting wise, you couldn't ask for a better cast. Antonio and SIR Ben Kingsley, and like an Oscar nominee and an Oscar winner.
Yes,
that's nuts.
Yeah, that was I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to watching it again.
Oh, cool!
The story is very intriguing, very engaging. The performances, of course, draw you in and keep you there. So, if anyone hasn't seen it, they need to go and find it. It's available everywhere because I've seen it. It was Apple had the Apple. Most of the apps, it's available for a fee like $4.99. I think it was Canadian. It's not much. Come on, for a great movie.
Security, yeah, Security was
yes.
Very proud of that one too. I wrote it about a year or two after Recoil. I thought it might be another Steve Austin movie, but Steve had taken a break from acting by that point. And Millennium Pictures, who had done The Expendables and Rambo, and Olympus Has Fallen, really the premier action studio, picked it up. So I was very, very lucky, and they were a cool studio to work with, and I was in good hands with them, and I was really happy the way it came out. It's just a great action film. Again, really harkened back to the movies that I grew up with, and the movies that I couldn't never imagine that I would wind up writing these action films. So it was definitely a dream come true, and it was very popular. Like, it did incredibly well on Netflix. It popped up in the Netflix top 10 like recently. the movie's a couple years old, but the algorithm, for whatever reason, people discovered it again, and it popped back up in the top 10.
Wow. That's great. That's great success, and congratulations on everything that you've accomplished. And what is in the pipeline for you next?
Yeah, everything. I'm always working. I've been very fortunate to have made a career doing this, and I get to live in this. This is my office. I'm out back. My wife let me have the guest house, and I could decorate it however I wanted. She got the house. I had the guest house. So this is not
thumbs up to her.
Yeah,
thumbs up.
She did a beautiful job with the house. This is all VHS tapes, but yeah. What's next? I'm working on an action thriller right now. It's sort of I guess I don't want to give too much away, but it's sort of it's set on a party island, so it's kind of like Die Hard in Ibiza. I guess that's the best way to describe it.
Okay.
That's a very small version of what it is, but that's been a lot of fun to sort of research.
Yes. Looking forward to it for sure.
And I'm working on another action thriller with one of the producers that I've worked with before. One of the producers I worked with on Science Fair and a couple other things. So I'm excited about that. It's going to be a busy holiday because I'm never really off. I always have work I have to do. I always
a lot of people would love to be in your position.
I don't know. It's writing is it's amazing. I get to craft stories and see things come to life sometimes. But also it can also be like you have a term paper constantly due. So you're constantly writing, you constantly want to make deadlines, but you have to be disciplined. And I always say it's also a numbers game. The more scripts you write, the more things you create, the more ideas you generate, the better luck you're going to have. I always tell first-time writers, don't work on one script for 5 years. Work on multiple projects, because it's like a 1 out of 10 thing sometimes.
And typically, how long does a 100-page script take you to write from beginning to end?
If you really love it, it shouldn't take too long. If you're struggling with it, it can take forever.
Mm-hmm.
But generally, I can write a first draft in about 2 to 3 months, and then, but the journey doesn't end with that, because then there's multiple rewrites that you do, not only for yourself, but if you have a manager, sometimes you'll do some rewrites for him, or he or she. You'll do some edits, and then it goes to a production company, and maybe they like it. If they like it, they're going to have their notes, so you're going to do rewrites for them. And then maybe this production company has an actor or a director they want to attach to it. You're going to have to do rewrites for them. So you better love your script, because you're going to spend a lot of time with it.
Wow. That's great advice. So everyone who's listening, where can they find you, John? Online.
I'm on X as Johnny Blackout, and I'm also on Instagram as Johnny Blackout 78.
All right, that's great. So before we close, who is your favorite superhero and why?
Oh, my favorite superhero. I know this is probably going to be the laziest answer, but I just love Spider-Man. I've always identified with Peter Parker. I always felt like Peter Parker in school, and I always wanted to be Spider-Man. So I would have to say Spider-Man. And I never wanted to be an actor, but when I was working at the talent agency and they were casting Spider-Man at the time, Toby hadn't signed on yet. I was in the back of my mind, I was like, I could play Spider-Man. I think I could play Spider-Man. But that was just like a fantasy. But I grew up on the comic books. I loved every iteration of Spider-Man. I'm really stoked about the new Spider-Verse.
Good fun.
But I liked the fact that Peter Parker was a student, this ordinary student, and he had these superpowers that no one really knew about. And I think that's wish fulfillment for any kid, guy or girl growing up. is just being like the secret superhero.
Yes. Well, I am so happy that Mr. Marco Freitas connected us
Marco's
and introduced me to your wonderful work. I love the films, and I will continue to
Thank you.
watch. And everyone who is listening in, please look for John Sullivan at IMDb, and the information will be in the show notes for sure. Thank you so much for joining the Journaling with PT podcast. I am your host, artist, PT Russell. Thank you. And as always, please stay tuned.
Thank you, PT.
All right.